Hello everybody.
Hey everyone.
Welcome to What's Up Watchtower. And today, episode 31.
Yeah, an important one that we've talked about making for a while. And I'm sure we're not going to cover everything that we'd like to say about this topic, but at least this is a start. And certainly other people have covered this topic as well. And we're going to provide links in the description about the things that we're talking about. And yeah,
and links to the resources as well, so you guys
exactly.
can see what we're doing.
Right.
So, yeah, actually what brought this up is that Robin and I were talking the other day, and having spoken to Jehovah's Witnesses, we know that it can be very difficult, almost impossible to reason with them, to state the facts of an argument and have them accept them as facts.
Yeah. They're happy to try to reason with you.
Oh yeah.
From the Bible and from their proof that they have from other documents that they haven't pulled it. The governing body or whoever's writing for the publications has pulled it for them, but we'll see how accurate that can be.
Yeah, so, well, you've had a case recently where you ran into this headlong.
Yeah, it's what, like we're talking about, it can be very difficult to reason with them. And before we get into that story, I just wanted to say that, we've sort of come to realize that it's probably impossible for us to wake up our family, and that's sort of the conclusion that we're coming to. And the reason for that is
cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And we realized that part of the reason that the YouTube videos and all the people who are contributing to that are gaining such popularity is because of the rampant cognitive dissonance within the organization, and people are really struggling with the thoughts they have in their head, and they're looking for answers, and they turn to the internet and they find different things there. But just as a really simplified, quick explanation, cognitive dissonance, cognitive being about your thinking process, and dissonance meaning disharmony. It's basically when you have two opposing thoughts in your head. And we can find this to a great extent in dealing with specific issues in the Jehovah's Witness organization.
I actually have a definition of cognitive dissonance, and many of you have probably done research on this before, but I'm going to go ahead and just read the definition I have. It says, in psychology, cognitive dissonance is the mental stress or discomfort experienced by an individual who holds two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values at the same time, performs an action that is contradictory to one or more beliefs, ideas, or values, or is confronted by new information that conflicts with existing beliefs, ideas, or values. And found it very interesting, the psychologist who coined this term, his name was Leon Fessinger, and he coined this term when studying a cult back in the 1950s, who were a religious cult that were looking for a prophecy to be fulfilled of a UFO landing that was imminent. And of course this didn't happen, and the sort of what happened after that with the members, some were disillusioned and ultimately left, but many of them stayed, and their faith became reaffirmed. They believed that because they had been so faithful and alert and aware, and that they had been, telling other people what was going to happen, that this in some way prevented it from happening. So they, in fact, they became more zealous towards their religion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is something that we've really been able to, now that we understand, this is all about how the human brain works. Really, I mean, this is how the human brain works and how it can be systematically manipulated. And this doesn't just go for Jehovah's Witnesses. As Robin just mentioned, it was another cult that this Dr. Fessinger was studying. And this is something that we see in cults, especially in high control groups. And we also see cognitive dissonance in our daily lives, but maybe not in such a harmful way as it is in some other ways. But, you've had an experience of dealing with someone who's really having an issue with cognitive dissonance, whether they know it or not.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell that story?
Well, yeah. I mean, I kind of told the story before that I had a conversation with my mother about one of the things that I had learned early on, when my research was that 607 BCE was not the year when Babylon took Jerusalem into captivity. And, her first reaction, well, what difference does that make in my life? And, my mouth was on the ground because I just couldn't believe that this is the woman who taught me the importance of understanding the prophecy in Daniel, the 2,520 years, and how we arrived at 1914 by counting back from 607, that was the starting date. So I just really encouraged her. I said, don't take my word for it. You don't need to go onto apostate websites. All you have to do is go to the library and do some research. Please, I encourage you, do the research outside of the Jehovah's Witness publications, because she said, well, I do research outside their publications. And I said, well, good. I said, and this is one of those cases where I encourage you to please go and do your research and let me know what you find. So a couple months later, when I had a conversation again, she said, oh, I did research that. And I said, well, and she says, and there's an explanation for why they believe that. And I said, well, where did you go to the library? Did you research it? She says, no, I looked it up in one of our more recent publications. And I said, Mom, you didn't do what I asked. I asked, please, to research outside of the Witness publications. And she's like, well, why should I when they've done all the research for me? And this is so upsetting. And I don't know, Mom, if you're going to ever watch this video, but you're just not being told the truth. You're just not. And, we're going to talk about that, a little bit about that, although that's not what this actual video is about. But, that's another lie. And you're being lied to. And you probably still won't believe it. But you are.
So, just as a point of interest, I went to the .org and I pulled up the article.
Yeah.
I said, let's see what she's looking at. So, it's not on the .org actually, it's on the JW Online Library. And so basically, this is the article. When was ancient Jerusalem destroyed? Part 2. It was from the November 1st Watchtower of 2011. And first of all, the thing I've been noticing about, especially the Watchtower literature, since I've been learning more and more about psychology and things like that, I pay attention to the way things are worded. Because the way things are worded can be deceptive without lying. They can be perhaps like lying by omission, not giving you the full statement or incomplete statements. So basically, this article, it's quite a long article, but I didn't need to read the whole thing to get where I wanted to go. The first note I wanted to mention, it says, secular historians base their conclusions on the writings of classical historians and the canon of Ptolemy. Well, I don't know how that has anything to do with actually determining the date of 607 or why it's in the Watchtower article. The next point says, some writings of classical historians contain significant errors and are not always consistent with the records on clay tablets. Well, that might be true, but is that applicable in this case, or is that just something you threw out there as a distraction to get people to think, well, maybe this writing contains a significant error and is not always consistent. But the truth of the matter is that that is not true. That little statement was put in there to put a question of doubt into the reader's mind. So as we scroll down, first paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph, we get to a part that says the Babylonian Chronicles. And you don't have to get far when it goes to the point. It says, what have experts said? And it says, R.H. Sack, a leading authority on cuneiform documents, states that the Chronicles provide an incomplete record of important events. And there's a star next to that, but I noticed on the JW Online Library there are no footnotes and no references on any of the articles. You have to have the actual printed material to be able to find the reference, unless you're good with the internet. So it says here, he wrote that historians must probe secondary sources ... in the hope of determining what actually happened. And I'm going to give you guys a little shot of that real quick. So I said to myself, man, anytime there's an ellipsis, I think I learned this from watching a lot of Mike and Kim stuff.
Yeah.
Anytime there's an ellipsis, there's
anytime there's a ... We love you, Mike.
Watchtower Babylon Crab Society back. Oh, so anytime we see an ellipsis, we know that something has been edited.
Yeah.
So, the next stop was Google to find Mr. R.H. Sack, to find out if he is a real person, what the real story is. And of course, he's a real person. He's he's still alive, born in 1944, living today. There's a link to this website that we're going to
we'll put it
in the description of the article. I'll just show you a quick screenshot so you know you're looking at the right one. Basically, this person looked up all of the scholars that were quoted in the 2011 Watchtower article that we just referenced, and sent them emails asking them about how they feel about the way their work was represented in the Watchtower article. So, of the names, Ronald H. Sack is first on the list. And it's of interest because in researching this, I found a forum that somebody had stated that Mr. Sack or Dr. Sack had responded with an email to this charge. And so I was actually able to find a copy of some correspondence, and this is a Gmail. It's also in the reference material that we're showing you guys. And this is from October the 12th, 2011, and this is from Ronald Sack. I have already responded to many who have asked this question. The Watchtower misrepresents me entirely. The date for the destruction of Jerusalem is 587 BC. The article in the Watchtower is unsigned and a complete misrepresentation of my work. Marjorie Alley of the Archaeological Institute of America has correctly represented me on her webpage, where she correctly quotes from my book, Neriglissar, King of Babylon, page 25 and 26. So, this is something that right away...
This is recent. Just a few years ago.
Yeah, and the fact that if you ask a Jehovah's Witness to research 607, that is the article they will pull up. That is the most recent article written as a rebuttal to those who would say Jerusalem was destroyed in 607. So, within the first 4 paragraphs of that article, we found a deliberate misrepresentation of someone's work so the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society could prove their point, and it's basically a lie. Okay, so after that discovery, what does a Jehovah's Witness do when they're faced with a fact that conflicts with what they've been told their whole life?
Well, if it's coming from an apostate, they're going to immediately believe that we're lying.
They're also going to believe that the information is false, that it has been doctored.
Yes, and that was something that I discovered over and over when talking with my parents, that they believed that the information was photoshopped, doctored, not this information in particular, but other information that I presented to them.
And that basically leads us right into the second half of this, which is what they're experiencing is cognitive dissonance, and also they've been groomed with cognitive bias. And whether they realize it or not, they have biases towards certain things, people, and situations, you know, whatever the case may be. So in our case, anytime the word apostate has been taught to a Jehovah's Witness for their entire life, what is that word associated with? Negative, bad, lying, deceitful, poisonous, working for the devil. All these kind of thoughts have been really reinforced into the Jehovah's Witness mind, so that when anything comes across their mind that might seem as if it's an apostate type thought,
because it conflicts with what they believe.
Yes, then they automatically will come up with so many defense mechanisms to justify what they believe. Because if they didn't do that, if they didn't justify what they believed, they would have to either change their beliefs, which in most cases is impossible because there's too much invested. They have too much of their life invested in this organization. And so it's impossible now to change beliefs. So what do? You take a person, you know, a son or a daughter who you've loved your whole life, and because of not being able to process what the truth is with what they've been told, it's easier for them to believe in their head that you are evil and that they should shut you out of their life. And I'm not saying that's easy, but it's easier to do that than it is to admit that they're wrong, or that the religion is wrong, or that the faith is wrong, or that even worse, the governing body has deliberately misrepresented so many things that actually equals lying. That's something that they cannot accept. And, you know, until understanding these basics of psychology, I don't think I really got that, you know?
Yeah, I didn't really understand it to the extent that I do now on a psychological level. And these ones are, like I said, it's going to be nearly impossible for them to ever acknowledge that what they believe is a lie and that they've been deliberately lied to.
Yeah. So I just want to read a definition here of cognitive bias. There's actually two definitions. I think it's important to read them both because they touch on slightly different, they have a slightly different edge to them. So the first one says, a cognitive bias refers to a systematic pattern of deviation from norm or rationality in judgment, whereby inferences about other people and situations may be drawn in an illogical fashion. Individuals create their own subjective social reality from their perception of the input. An individual's construction of social reality, not the objective input, may dictate their behavior in the social world. Thus, cognitive biases may sometimes lead to a perpetual distortion, inaccurate judgment, illogical interpretation, or what is broadly called irrationality. And then I'll go to the next one real quick and we'll talk about this. Congeniality bias, which is also called confirmation bias. It refers to how people read or access information that affirms their already established opinions rather than referencing material that contradicts them.
That is what this really is.
So just as an example, and we can talk more about this, for example, a person who is politically right-leaning might only watch news commentary that is from a conservative news source, just as left-leaning individuals may only watch news commentary from progressive news sources. This bias is particularly apparent when someone is faced with deeply held beliefs, when a person has a high commitment to their attitudes. So this is really what we're seeing with the Jehovah's Witnesses right now. It's a cognitive bias. They, when confronted with anything that would contradict their belief, they go to research it in the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society publications, which affirms for them that what they're believing is right. Even though those publications are biased themselves. So it's really a false sense of security that you can kind of have to be comforted, to know that, oh, these things that I'm believing are true.
Because all you're reading, all you're researching is just going to reaffirm what you've been indoctrinated to believe.
Yeah. And unfortunately, well, anyone who's had to go through some changes in their life knows that making serious personal changes is difficult. It is not an easy thing to do, and it usually comes at the realization that something is absolutely necessary, like something has to change. You know, and sometimes even though people know that, like an example where a person may be an alcoholic and they see their family falling apart and their wife is threatening to leave and take the kids, they realize that this is a problem and they might not be able to stop that behavior. But in a situation like that, that may be what wakes that person up to realizing what's happening. It's very difficult to understand what goes on in a person's individual brain, but noticing how the Jehovah's Witnesses deal with this thought process can really give us some insight onto how to better understand the way they think and how to maybe better converse with them.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not impossible. I mean, look at those of us who have woken up. But like I said from the very first video that we ever made, that, you know, you can't force anybody to wake up. And for every person, it's going to be something different. But learning about these, I mean, it is kind of a little disheartening when you start doing this kind of research, because you realize that you are just really facing an uphill battle, and that the chances of success in reaching, which is why, you know, I knew this was an uphill battle, you know, since we woke up, which is why I never had these conversations with my family, because I knew they believe what they believe. I'm not going to be able to change that, but I didn't understand why I wouldn't be able to change that. And now, you know, I have the resources and the research to sort of understand better why that was going to be so difficult, if not impossible.
And we faced our own issues with cognitive dissonance too,
sure.
as we were, you know, as we were in the organization.
Yeah.
For example, to me, the thing, and this is before we started making videos, before we had really thought about doing anything like that, in the Watchtower broadcasting, the JW broadcasting, the teaching of the generation of 1914 and how it was changed to the teaching of overlapping generations. Now, as a person who had been taught one very specific teaching my entire life, that the generation of 1914 would not pass away, and, you know, before the end came, and literally that being the only acceptable teaching and understanding of that at that time, when they had come out with the overlapping generations teaching, it immediately hit me as like, no way. And I wasn't even a witness at the time, but I heard it. I watched the diagram being explained, and I said, I can't believe this. I can't make sense of this. It's against everything I've always been taught. And we know that that is what will wake Jehovah's Witnesses up in their own due time individually, but it's the organizational changes and the things that can be seen over a period of time that is going to wake people up.
Yeah, I think it is. It is waking people up. And, you know, I feel like this whole thing is crumbling and falling apart, and they know it. They know they're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you go onto YouTube, if you Google Jehovah's Witnesses, if you put in the search Jehovah's Witnesses, I mean, just page after page after page of apostate YouTube channels.
Yeah.
If you Google it, page after page after page. I mean, J.W. Orr comes up obviously on the first page, but everything else that comes up is not.
Right.
So and I find it interesting that people have commented on other videos about why is it that there's so many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses on YouTube and all over the internet, and you don't see that with other fringe groups. You don't see that with other, you know, even Scientology or Mormonism. It's not, I mean, this is a special time for Jehovah's Witness history, for sure.
I just read a statistic about this today.
Yeah?
And it was I actually still have the link saved. It was a poll by the, was it not Gallup? It was one of the, it was a national poll.
Pew?
Pew.
Oh, okay.
It was a Pew Research study. Thank you. 2/3 of Jehovah's Witnesses who were born and raised in the organization leave. 2/3. And if you compare that with Mormons, which was also listed, 64% or something, like about 2/3 who are born in Mormons stay.
Wow.
So it was really interesting. Yeah, that was you can just Google Pew Research on Jehovah's Witnesses. It's a whole page that comes up, a lot of statistics. It's very interesting. And yeah, I saw that just today, and it goes right along with what you were saying. So we know that this is going to be the big wake-up call for Jehovah's Witnesses. And I can tell you for myself, I've had dealing with cognitive dissonance. You know, there's a couple of ways you can handle it. You can say, this doesn't exist and kind of ignore it, but only for so long, until you're confronted with something else that conflicts with your beliefs. And eventually you will have to face it. And that's the one thing we know for sure, that the way the human mind works, if you have that dissonance, those two different thoughts battling out, it can cause depression, anxiety, illness, all kinds of health problems. And you know, it's just really interesting to note the state of people inside the organization today. And that's not an uncommon thing, is it, either?
Not at all.
People undergoing health problems, people on antidepressants. Not that that doesn't happen, you know, in the entire world as well. But I think as well, if you'll do research on that, you'll find that the number of Jehovah's Witnesses enduring those type of things is greater than the outside percentages.
Yeah, it's true. And there has been research studies on that, so
Absolutely.
you can look those up too.
Boy, it's just, there's just so much information out there.
Yeah.
So, as Robin was just saying, you know, we've really seen an army of people show up on YouTube talking about the Jehovah's Witnesses. And this is not the first time that the Jehovah's Witnesses have had a mass exodus. It has actually happened a handful of times, especially early on, and that's something that we'll mention in a future video about the origins of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. But just specifically in this instance, there were changes made to doctrine when Judge Rutherford took over, and you know, there was a mass exodus of people who didn't necessarily agree with what he was doing. They didn't think what he was doing was in harmony with all of the teachings of Pastor Russell from the beginning. So they had this cognitive dissonance, and it resulted in them having to make a choice. And the choice that they had was to remain international Bible students and not be Jehovah's Witnesses. And whether you guys realize it out there today or not, I actually know some of you do, because I've had one international Bible student at least comment on one of our videos. But the international Bible students are alive and kicking and doing just fine. Yep. That is a long-established religion, well, longer than the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Pretty much, because Jehovah's Witness was pretty much a new religion that Rutherford came up with, because he changed so many doctrines and teachings.
Yeah,
and gave it a new name.
We'll get into that, and we have facts to back it up, and it's very interesting. But this has happened before, and what happens now is all of the new converts who are coming into the organization, they will never hear about 1975, at least not from fellow witnesses anyway. They will never hear that a child of the age of reason of about 10 years old to understand what was happening in 1914 will still be alive at the end of the system of things. No, that's all gone. They are not going to hear that.
Or that actually what was being preached was that 1914 would be the end.
Well, that even
that
goes
they
back
were, yeah,
further.
that they were already in Jesus' invisible presence, and that 1914 would be the end, and that's when Armageddon was going to come.
Right. Well, that's actually an excellent point, because I'm sure X amount of people, when they were originally taught that Christ's invisible presence would come in 1874 and that the end of this wicked system would be in 1914, I'm sure many of those people said, it didn't happen, I've had enough, and that is going to be the continuous pattern again and again. And the reason is because this is an organization that is run by men. They have no powers of prophecy. God's blessing is not upon them. They're just men. And that is why this will continue to happen, because they will use people for as long as the people can tolerate it, until finally something breaks. A change in teaching, a change in the way the organization is run. I mean, how many people were upset that were at Bethel who were laid off and sent home? I mean, is that going to affect the way they view the organization? I bet.
For those that got laid off, it is.
That's right. And for the others, guess what? There's so many people who don't know about that. It's actually just not known. It's not talked about. It's hidden, for the better sense of a word, So I guess what we're saying is this has happened before. It's going to continue to happen, because they're just running this continual cycle. And once it goes long enough that the prophecies that they've talked about cannot be sustained, they have to make a change. And they know for a fact when they do it, they're going to lose X% of the people in the organization. They were going to
lose them anyway, because the prophecies didn't come true.
Yeah. So it's a collateral damage. They knew this was going to happen. But I think with the advent of the YouTube community, the vast apostate army, and all of those pioneers, not pioneers, but the people who came before us, who started this. And I'm thinking even back to like Rick Farron, going back 9 years ago on YouTube, really doing something, So there's people who've been doing this for as long as YouTube has been around. But now that this has become more widely known, and the Jehovah's Witnesses have really kind of put themselves out there on the internet, and that's kind of going to be a mistake for them, I think.
Well, they put themselves in the crosshairs because of how they've gone about their proselytizing. So they've pointed their finger at every other group for decades and decades and decades about what other religions are teaching, the false prophecies, the false doctrines. They've been pointing their fingers and at everybody else, but now they can be exposed at just a click of a mouse button.
But you won't be able to get a Jehovah's Witness to see that because of the cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
So that's our effort, just to try and get people to realize they may be feeling it inside, and not, it may be showing itself as a sign of depression. You know, that may be how it is showing itself to you. And if you're going to meetings and you're currently a Jehovah's Witness, or you know, maybe you are a person who's been away from the organization for a long time, but you in your heart believe that this was the truth, and you have feelings of guilt because you're not going to the meetings. You have feelings of maybe that you're going to die at Armageddon because you're not a good Jehovah's Witness.
Or because you're disfellowshipped currently.
Yes.
And you believe that you were justifiably disfellowshipped. And now you're hating on us because we're trying to encourage people to find out the truth about the truth.
Yeah. But once
you have cognitive dissonance. I'm sorry, but you do.
Somebody actually made a comment on one of the videos, and I thought, how perfect is this person's comment to me if he just thought about what he was saying. He said that the apostates are like the Flat Earth Society. A group of people who, despite all evidence to the contrary, maintain belief that the earth is flat. And I said to myself, well, if that ain't the pot calling the kettle black, I don't know what is. Because as a group, Jehovah's Witnesses are deniers of evidence.
Yeah.
And
huge deniers of evidence. They don't want to see it. They don't want to examine it. They believe that it's all lies, that it's been doctored, that any scientific study is in some way flawed, that if someone puts, as we all know, that the Shepherding the Flock of God handbook is online, that they believe that it's not genuine, that it's been photoshopped, that we don't know how the organizational structure really works because we're just little sheep and they're elders and they know how it works. They can't believe that we actually do know.
Yeah. And it actually makes me think of something else that's going on in the world right now, where you can see cognitive dissonance at its peak. And that is the whole debate on climate change.
Yeah.
Here you have scientists almost in complete unity from around the globe saying that climate change is happening. The ice caps are melting. We got a problem here. And at this point, it's probably reversible. You know, the temperature rise is irreversible, you know, so what's going to happen is going to happen. But there are so many people who will, you know, and I think of politicians and stuff, who are deniers of climate change. There are people who deny that the Holocaust happened. They are called Holocaust deniers.
Yeah.
And there are people who will argue with you and say that that never happened. There are people who will argue with you and say man never landed on the moon. I mean, there are people who will deny evidence and facts when it's placed right in front of them, no matter what we're talking about. There's going to be someone who will deny it. So
I was going to say that it's very interesting, though, that especially when it comes to other religions and cults who are obviously, you know, in cognitive dissonance, that witnesses are very, you know, apt to point out that, you know, how could they believe such a thing? How could they have followed Jim Jones down to the jungles, and, you know, how did they not know what was going on?
Why didn't they trust their gut? Why didn't they trust their gut feelings when they knew something was wrong? Well,
how do people fall into Scientology? Now, that documentary, Going Clear, I mean, very eye-opening to watch.
There's a lot of psychological factors that keep people in their religion. And the Jehovah's Witnesses have mastered these techniques of manipulation and control. And it is unfortunate, and, you know, it really stinks that people are living like that and don't even know. You know, it's just sad because they, as it was actually said a famous person had said something as a quote. It's like they build a prison, an invisible prison, and they live inside it, and they can't see the walls that they've built. But they're the ones who constructed this invisible prison that they themselves are living inside. And if someone were to come try and tear it down, they would fight them because it's something that they've built. It's the weirdest type of thing, but once you understand a little bit of basic psychology, you do kind of understand why people think the way that they do.
Yeah, and the greatest example that I can think of cognitive dissonance within the Jehovah's Witnesses that would affect them deeply on a psychological level, that would affect their mental health and ultimately, I believe, their physical health, is saying that they love unconditionally and yet they shun those who have left or who were disfellowshipped. And trying to hold those two beliefs at the same time, where you're suffering and you're causing your suffering by shunning, which is the most unloving thing a person can do to another human being. That is the epitome of cognitive dissonance. That is what is affecting the mental health of Jehovah's Witnesses.
It's an organization that is literally making itself sick by its actions.
Yeah.
And you can say physically sick. I'll go as far as to say spiritually sick, mentally sick. You know, not saying that the people that are the average publishers going to the Kingdom Hall are mentally sick or anything like that, but I'm saying the way the organization is twisting the information that people receive and the way it's painting with a broad brush the entire world around them, and the fact that they just can't see that it's not true is really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know we've kind of gone on and on a little bit about it, but as you can tell, it's something we feel passionately about. It's something that we're continuing to learn about. And as we talk to more and more people, I know we just hear more and more stories about how people have known or have felt for such a long time that something wasn't right. And it will at some point maybe get you to think or do a little bit of research or look into a single topic that just didn't sit right with you. And I encourage you to do that. See where it takes you. Because if you're already kind of feeling bad about where you're at, what's the harm, you know? It's liberating to know the truth.
Yeah. And yeah, on that note, just wanted to mention, speaking of, you know, doing research, something that didn't sit well, Candace Lambert, we just spoke on the phone. I want to say hi. I'm so glad that you're doing well. She hasn't made videos lately, and that's because she's been moving. But her whole waking up came from, she just wanted to research 607 BCE. Go and watch her videos. They're really funny and very interesting how she was forced basically to disassociate herself when all she wanted was help from the elders to understand.
Yep.
So, but yeah, so good talking to a lot of people that we've been talking to lately, and it's so encouraging for us that we have, you know, such good friends now that are coming into our lives.
I'm actually going to put this out there. I'm glad that you said that. You know, I've had the privilege to speak with a few people on the phone that have gotten in touch with us through our channel, and I would just want to put it out there. I would be thrilled to speak with any one of you out there. I don't care if you want to call up and talk about music, or you want to talk about what we're doing with the What's Up Watchtower, you want to talk about your story or what's going on. I am 100% accessible. Send us an email at What's Up Watchtower. Give me your phone number. I'll call you back. And, you know, let's get in touch, because I am more of a talky on the phone kind of a person than an email-y kind of person.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm both, but I do. Yeah. I generally respond to the emails, so I get behind because I'm quite busy. But
yeah, she's been working a lot too on doing all the editing for the videos and spending hours and hours and hours doing that kind of stuff. So
And
while
research.
she's doing that stuff, I have time to talk to you guys on the phone.
Yeah.
So, you know, but I really would like to meet as many people as possible. So I just wanted to throw that out there because everyone that I've talked to so far, it's been a positive experience. And I'm looking forward to meeting more people. So anybody wants to get in touch, just shoot us an email at What's Up Watchtower, and
Yeah.
that'd be good. Also, I think we hit a milestone.
Ooh, we did. Last night we hit a milestone. 100,000 views.
Yeah, we just passed 100,000 views on our YouTube channel.
That's crazy.
Which
My coworker said, "That's bananas."
that is bananas. Because if you would have told me 4 months ago, oh, if you do a YouTube channel, you get 1,000 views, I'd say, no way, 1,000? Are you, holy cow, 1,000? So we're really very thankful and appreciative for all of you out there. And we appreciate the support. We appreciate everyone who watches. We hope that in every episode that we do, that there's at least something that you can take away that will help you. And that's really what we're looking to do. We want to be able to help people, to maybe point them in a direction or give them information. Anything that we can really do. We don't even know what we can do to help you.
Yeah.
But we want to help you.
Yeah,
So-
and I said it on our last video, our episode 30, although it didn't get as many views, probably because it just wasn't like, you know, a hard-hitting type of episode. But I would love to interview any of you that are willing to come on. So I'm putting it out there again. Contact us through our website. You know, there's a contact form. And let me know if you're interested in coming on and doing an interview at some point.
Oh, and that reminds me, as we're talking about What's Up Watchtower, I wanted to mention on our website, we have a couple of new additions to the website. I'm actually just going to make sure I say this properly. But we have had a couple of bloggers who have written just some really cool stuff, and they have a good blog, and we have linked them to the website now.
Yeah.
So on What's Up Watchtower,
We have a links page on, there's a links page on our website. And if you scroll through that, you know, there's links to all kinds of different things, research and whatnot. But there's links to those blogs. And I tweeted them also. Follow us on Twitter at UpWatchtower.
yeah, Up Watchtower.
That was our handle. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah,
But
Twitter made it. So
anyways, follow us on Twitter too at UpWatchtower.
But we've been very encouraged by the participation of the people we've spoken with. Now we've got some people writing some articles for the website. We've got some bloggers who are continuously doing their blog, which will be shared on the website. And we've got Floyd always behind the scenes, rocking and rolling 24/7, making things happen. So thanks, Floyd, again. We really appreciate your hard work.
Yeah.
So basically, gradually we're expanding.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But
Well.
next time we're going to talk more about this whole issue of cognitive dissonance and the way people perceive the information that's coming their way. We're also going to be discussing more about propaganda, inculcation, and indoctrination. Something that we've done some research on already, but just haven't had a chance to make the video yet. So it goes kind of right along with this topic, so tune in for that soon. Also upcoming, a recap of the true history of the Jehovah's Witness organization.
Yeah, some of you probably know some of this information, but
Yep.
we're going to share what we've found in our research.
So we're back on track, everybody. Time to get some serious stuff rolling.
Yeah, we are getting some serious stuff rolling, and I am hoping to share some information with you guys at some point. I'm not in a position to really do that now. This is a teaser basically, but some things, some important stuff that we are working on, and we'll talk more about it.
I just remembered what you're talking about.
Yeah, some really hard-hitting stuff, and it's hard. It's very difficult to deal with, and I'm sure people like Mike and Kim that get lots of letters and lots of stories will understand how emotionally upsetting things that have come to light into, that people are sharing with us now. But I feel, they've tried to beat me down, they've shunned me, they aren't responding to texts and phone calls, and because they're being led by 7 men, is it 7? 7 men up in New York, they're unleashing a dragon. And I can tell you what, this dragon is ferocious. I may look sweet, not so much.
It's funny because they started this. You guys started a fight, we're gonna finish it.
Yeah. So, we still love our families. Yep. We're gonna end with saying that.
Love you, everybody.
We still love you, and we love all of you that are now becoming our extended family.
Be our friends, everybody. Yeah. We want you to be our friends.
Thank you so much for watching, and till next time.
Have a great night.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.